Hello everyone, my name is Jinjos, and welcome to mission number 8 of Bageltops Marvel Legendary Campaign. We got a lot to get through, so let's jump right in. Mission 8, Icebreaker. While playing the part of lab assistant to the resident geniuses, your phone speakers emit a burst of static. Picking it up, you watch as your screen fades to an image of an odd middle-aged man wearing what appears to be stereoscopic 3D glasses? "Attention, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents," he says in a voice much more shrill than you had expected. "I am Mole Man. Your little experiment has caused quite the ruckus here in my subterranean kingdom. For years I've tolerated your surface-dwelling transgressions, your corporations dumping toxic waste on pristine Earth, your pilfering of the resources of the underground. Now unnatural seismic activity. Enough is enough." He readjusts his glasses and continues. "You will cease all underground activities, all pollution of the earth, and all looting of resources, and leave the underground be. Failure to comply could have immediate and catastrophic consequences." Despite his demeanor, he seems to be waiting for your response. What in the world do you say to that? To summarize the negotiations, didn't go well. While I got an initial increase in my negotiation points, I ended up taking a wrong path and ended up with an overall score of 0. This leads to Mole Man's plans to remain a secret, and we wait on our toes for a surprise attack. Once the attack occurs, we have to make a mad dash to add heroes to our team. This leads to us having to have a random team for this scenario, and to have Deadpool forced onto the team. We also add Angel, Nightcrawler, Wolverine, and Invisible Woman to the team. Before going into the setup, let's take a look at our hero composition. There isn't a lot. Let's get that out of the way. But what we can cobble together, we'll start with Wolverine's card, Sudden Ambush, which will grant us 2 attack, and if we draw an extra card previously, we will increase it to 4 attack. A great damage dealing card with an easy activation cost. We could support this through his other common card, Animal Instincts, which will draw us a card, and then when activated by an instinct hero, will grant us 2 damage. Angel's common card, High Speed Chase, will also fit in nicely, which will draw us 2 cards and discard 1. In order to activate Animal Instincts, we can recruit Bamf, Nightcrawler's common card, which will grant us 2 recruit and give us the ability to teleport it, meaning we can set it aside without playing it and add it to our next hand. To take advantage of High Speed Chase, we can also use Angel's common card, Diving Catch, which will grant us 2 recruit, but if we discard it, we can draw 2 cards and rescue a bystander. Not useful in activating Sudden Ambush, as we need High Speed Chase to activate this, but drawing more cards is never a bad thing. Nightcrawler's other common card, Blend into the Shadows, will grant us 2 attack and also has Teleport. It's more of a generic good card and one to fill in when needed. Next up, we have Disappearing Act, which will grant us 2 recruit and a Focus 2 ability, which means we can spend 2 recruit for an ability, and in this case, we can KO a card from our hand or discard pile, a solid way to thin out our deck. Deadpool's common card is next. Here, hold this for a second, which will grant us 2 recruit, and a villain of our choice will capture a bystander. Next is his other common card, Oddball, which will grant us 2 attack and an additional attack for each odd-numbered card played this turn. Rounding out our common cards is Four of a Kind, which will grant us 2 attack and will grant us an additional 2 if it's activated by another card that costs 4. As I said before, not a whole lot of synergy here. We're honestly just going to cross our fingers and hope for the best. We will keep an eye out for odd-numbered cards and the ones that cost 4, and we have a decent split with these cards, costing 4, and these ones being odd numbers. The uncommon cards aren't all that to write home about either, so let's just jump right in. The scheme our heroes will face today is the Invisible Force Field. This will add 7 twists to the villain deck, and when we draw one, we will stack it next to the Mastermind. For each twist next to him, we will have to pay 1 recruit or 1 damage to break through that force field to fight him. If all 7 schemes are drawn, we will lose. Our Mastermind is the infamous Mole Man, who will gain 1 HP for each subterranean villain in the escape pile. When we draw a Master Strike, all subterranean villains will escape the city, and if this occurs, each player will gain a wound. Our Mastermind will be aided by the Subterranian and the Underworld villain group, with Sentinels being the Henchmen. Our starting HQ will consist of Nightcrawler's uncommon card, Swashbuckling, which grants us 3 attack, and when activated by an instinct and a covert hero, will grant us another 3. Next is a copy of Bamf, Animal Instincts, and Hey Can I Get a Do-Over, Deadpool's uncommon card, which will grant us 2 attack, and if this is the first card played, you can discard your hand and draw 4 cards. Rounding it out is Wolverine's uncommon card, No Mercy, which will draw a card, and we can KO a card from our hand or discard. Harrison wins the hairiest mole competition and starts us off. Harrison draws 3 agents, 3 troopers, and then a news reporter from the villain deck, which Mole Man will capture. He plays out and has some solid options for turn 1 by. With no urgency to fight anything, he recruits Bamf, replacing it with Sudden Ambush. He passes. Miles draws 3 agents, 3 troopers, and then a scheme twist from the villain deck, which will act as a force field to Mole Man. He plays out and goes for Hey Can I Get a Do-Over, replacing it with Oddball. He passes. Harrison draws 5 agents, a trooper, and a Master Strike from the villain deck. With no Subterranean villains in the city, there's no effect. He plays out and has a plethora of options available. He decides to use all his recruit and recruit Swashbuckling, replacing it with No Mercy. He passes. Miles has an almost identical turn, drawing 5 agents and a trooper, and then another Master Strike from the villain deck, which was just as effective as the first one. He plays out and has multiple options, with most of them pointing towards Wolverine. Wanting to collect the enabler of sudden ambush first, he recruits No Mercy and replaces it with Bamf. He passes. Harrison draws 6 agents, and then a scheme twist from the villain deck, increasing the force field to 2. He plays out and decides to make the move into collecting odd-numbered cards, and recruits Oddball, replacing it with Disappearing Act. He passes. Miles draws 4 agents, a trooper, Hey Can I Get a Do-Over, and then a Sentinel from the villain deck. When we fight a Sentinel, we will need to KO one of our heroes. He plays out and recruits another No Mercy, hoping to thin his deck early, and replaces it with Diving Catch. He then fights the Sentinel and KOs an agent. He passes. Harrison draws 2 agents, 3 troopers, Swashbuckling, and then a Sentinel from the villain deck. He plays out, he fights a Sentinel, and KOs an agent. He doesn't want to take a Wolverine card from Miles, so he passes. Miles draws 2 agents, 3 troopers, No Mercy, and then a Dracula from the villain deck. His ambush effect triggers, capturing a sudden ambush from the top of the hero deck and increasing his HP to 7. He plays No Mercy, drawing an agent, and KOing an agent. He plays out and recruits Animal Instincts, replacing it with Unseen Rescue. This is Invisible Woman's uncommon card, and with it, it'll grant us 2 attack, and we can focus 2 to rescue a bystander. He passes. Harrison draws 2 agents, 3 troopers, Bamf, Swashbuckling, and then a Giganto from the villain deck. When we fight Giganto, we will draw 2 extra cards in our next hand. He also has the Burrow ability, meaning when we fight him, instead of placing him in our victory pile, he will instead be moved to the streets, unless there is a villain already there. He plays out and decides to recruit Bamf over Disappearing Act for all the wrong reasons, replacing it with Sudden Ambush. He passes. Miles draws 4 agents, a trooper, No Mercy, and then a scheme twist from the villain deck, increasing the force field to 3. He plays No Mercy, drawing Animal Instincts, and KOing a trooper. He plays Animal Instincts and draws Hey Can I Get a Do-Over. He plays out, and with enough enablers, he decides to recruit Sudden Ambush, replacing it with Unseen Rescue. He passes. Harrison draws 4 agents, 2 troopers, and then a Sentinel from the villain deck. He plays out and has some sense to recruit Disappearing Act, replacing it with Here, hold this for a second. He passes. Miles draws 2 agents, 3 troopers, No Mercy, and then Lilith, Daughter of Dracula. When she escapes, each player without Dracula in their victory pile will gain a wound. He plays No Mercy, drawing and KOing an agent. He plays out, fights a Sentinel, and KOs an agent. He passes. Harrison draws 3 agents, Oddball, Disappearing Act, Swashbuckler, and then a Bystander from the villain deck, which Lilith captures. He plays out and makes another questionable recruit in Here, hold this for a second, replacing it with Disappearing Act. He then activates Disappearing Act, KOing an agent, not wanting for each player to gain a wound when fighting Lilith. He passes. Miles plays 3 agents, Sudden Ambush, No Mercy, Hey Can I Get a Do-Over, and then a Moloids from the villain deck. He plays No Mercy, drawing an Animal Instincts, and then KOing an agent. He plays Do-Over, and then an activated Animal Instincts, drawing a trooper. He plays out and moves in on Mole Man, fighting through the force field with his recruit. He rescues a news reporter from Mole Man, drawing a trooper, which he plays. He then draws Secret Tunnel, which will grant Miles 6 attack, but it can only be used on a villain in the streets. He then fights Dracula, gaining the Sudden Ambush he captured when he ambushed. He passes. Harrison draws an agent, 4 troopers, Bamf, and then a Megatar from the villain deck. Its ambush effect triggers, and he captures 2 bystanders. Harrison teleports Bamf and plays out. He fights the Moloid, KOing a trooper. He passes. Miles draws 2 agents, a trooper, No Mercy, Animal Instincts, Can I Get a Do-Over, and a scheme twist from the villain deck, increasing the force field to 4. He plays No Mercy, drawing Sudden Ambush, and KOing an agent. He then plays Can I Get a Do-Over, and an activated Animal Instincts, drawing an agent. He plays out and attacks Mole Man and draws Master of Monsters. Harrison reveals the top 6 cards of the villain deck. Withdrawing no Subterranean villains, they are all placed at the bottom of the villain deck in a random order. He passes. Harrison draws 4 agents, 2 Bamfs, Disappearing Act, and then a Dracula from the villain deck. His ambush effect triggers and captures Disappearing Act from the top of the hero deck, increasing his HP to 7. He plays his 2 copies of Bamf and Disappearing Act. He then activates Disappearing Act, KOing 3 agents from his hand to thin out his deck. He passes. Miles draws 2 agents, 1 Trooper, Animal Instincts, Sudden Ambush, No Mercy, and then a Moloid from the villain deck. He plays No Mercy, drawing Can I Get a Do-Over, and KOing an agent. He plays Can I Get a Do-Over into Animal Instincts, drawing a Trooper. He plays out and then hits Mole Man, drawing a Dig to Freedom. Each player places a Subterranean villain from their victory pile into the escape pile, increasing Mole Man's HP by doing so. Since the villain escaped, we KO Unseen Rescue and replaces it with Oddball. He passes. Harrison draws 1 agent, 2 Troopers, Here Hold This, Swashbuckler, Oddball, and then a Master Strike from the villain deck, causing 3 Subterranean villains to escape. Among these villains, 2 bystanders also escaped, causing Harrison to discard an agent and a trooper, and Miles discarding 2 cards. We then KO Unseen Rescue, Disappearing Act, and Diving Catch. They are replaced by 2 copies of 4 of a Kind and a High-Speed Chase. Due to the Mole Man's Master Strike ability, each of the player also gains a wound. Harrison then plays out and fights Dracula, gaining Disappearing Act. He passes. Miles draws a Trooper, No Mercy, Sudden Ambush, Animal Instincts, and then a Black Heart from the villain deck. His ambush effect triggers, and since Harrison can't reveal a Marvel Knight hero, he gains a wound. Miles plays No Mercy, drawing a Can I Get a Do-Over, and KOing a wound from his discard pile. He plays Can I Get a Do-Over into Animal Instincts, drawing No Mercy. He plays No Mercy, drawing and KOing an agent. He plays out and fights Lilith, rescuing a bystander. He passes. Harrison draws an agent, 3 Troopers, Disappearing Act, Unseen Rescue, and then a Azazel from the villain deck. When we fight him, 1 card in our hand will gain teleport for the turn. He plays out and then recruits High-Speed Chase, replacing it with Animal Instincts. With nothing noteworthy to teleport for fighting Azazel, he passes. Harrison draws an agent, 2 Sudden Ambushes, No Mercy, Can I Get a Do-Over, Animal Instincts, and then a Scheme Twist from the villain deck, raising the force field to 5. At this point, Miles' deck is very thin, and can draw all of his cards every single turn. He draws the rest of his deck, and he can generate 15 points of damage and 1 recruit. Not enough to fight Mole Man. So at this point, we'll be mostly skipping his turn, but using it to keep the city clear. He doesn't want wounds to be gained from fighting Blackheart, and he doesn't want to teleport anything from his hand. So, he passes. Harrison draws an agent, Disappearing Act, Swashbuckler, Hold This, 2 copies of Bamf, and then a Raktar the Mole and King from the villain deck. His ambush effect won't trigger, as there are no villains in the street, but he does have the burrow effect. He plays out and teleports 1 copy of Bamf, and holds an agent to teleport later. He also gives a bystander to Azazel. He then recruits 4 of a Kind, needing to bump his damage output, replacing it with Random Acts of Unkindness, which will grant a 6 attack, and when played, he can choose to gain a wound, and then all players will pass 1 card from their hand to a player on their left. He then fights Azazel and rescues a paramedic, which he uses to KO a wound from his discard pile. We then activate Disappearing Act, KOing a 2nd wound from our discard pile. He passes. On Miles' turn, he draws a Megatar from the villain deck, which captures 2 bystanders as it enters. Miles can produce 15 attack, and takes out Raktar once from the bank and then from the streets after it burrows, and a Megatar. He passes. Harrison draws a Trooper, Oddball, High-Speed Chase, Disappearing Act, Here Hold This, Bamf, and then teleports in a Bamf and an agent. He draws a Scheme Twist from the villain deck, raising the force field to 6. Only 1 more and we lose the game. He plays High-Speed Chase, drawing a Trooper and 4 of a Kind, discarding an agent. He plays out and gifting a bystander to Blackheart. He then produces enough recruit to fight through the force field and enough damage to fight Mole Man, winning the game. The force field was an unexpected nuisance. Eventually you managed to break through, but the effort cost you quite a bit of time. You finally reach Mole Man's inner sanctum. With the force field down, he was easy enough to subdue and detain. However, he left evidence of his plans to melt the world's glaciers and flood several of the world's cities. After Call to HQ, you learned Mole Man was unfortunately able to remotely carry out at least part of his plan, and flood several cities in East Asia. Despite this, you are commended for your efforts in his capture, and HQ offers you some time off as they gather new recruits for your team. Write Down, Mole Man in Prison, and Cities Flooded. Thank you so much for joining me for another great game in Marvel Legendary. Join me next time where we'll be finishing off Chapter 3 of Bageltops' campaign by fighting the infamous Galactus. If you're interested in playing this campaign, there is a link in the description. See y'all next time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.